Welcome to Storytales. Please like this video and subscribe to Storytales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The green glow of security monitors cast shadows across John Mercer's face as his fingers moved across the control panel with practiced efficiency. Each screen showed a different angle of the corporate skyscraper he'd guarded for the past 3 years. The night shift was ending, but his work never truly stopped. Camera 23, pan right, he murmured into his radio. The operator in the basement responded immediately, rotating the view to cover a blind spot John had identified months ago. Nothing there, as usual. But the ghost didn't survive this long by missing details. 3 years ago, when he'd walked away from Phantom Group, an elite special forces division so classified that most military brass didn't know it existed, John had chosen this job carefully. A corporate security position offered structure, predictability, and most importantly, invisibility. The perfect cover for a man who'd spent 15 years eliminating high-value targets without leaving traces. The midnight to 6 shift suited his habits. Quiet hours when he could maintain his edge without drawing attention. Tonight had been typical. 2 drunk executives who needed taxi calls, 1 maintenance worker who'd forgotten his key card, and 3 drug dealers in the parking garage who'd required a firmer reminder about territory. No paperwork necessary for that last one. Some problems solve themselves when handled properly. John checked his watch. 5:45 a.m. Right on schedule. Ted pushed through the revolving door, shaking rain from his umbrella. "Morning, John. Anything exciting?" "Routine night." John's voice was neutral, practiced. Ted was a good guy, former Army with 2 tours in Afghanistan. But he'd never understand the kind of operations John had run. The kind of man who earned the name Ghost by making problems disappear without a trace. "You must miss the action sometimes," Ted said, settling behind the desk. "All those years in service has to be more exciting than watching cameras all night." John's face remained impassive. The lies came easily after 3 years of practice. Special forces became regular Army. Classified missions became routine deployments. Phantom Group became just another infantry unit. Prefer it quiet. He gathered his things with mechanical precision, each movement economical. His backpack contained 3 hidden compartments that had never been open at work. Old habits died hard, and in his experience, it was the careful ones who stayed alive. The drive home took exactly 23 minutes in pre-dawn traffic. John counted each turn, each traffic light, observing license plates, and identifying vehicles that appeared more than once in his mirrors. Seattle's morning mist clung to the streets, providing good cover while limiting visibility. Tactical considerations never really left his mind. Their suburban house appeared exactly as he'd left it 12 hours ago. 2 stories, beige siding, mature evergreens providing cover from neighboring windows. He'd chosen it for the clear sight lines and multiple escape routes, though he'd told Vanessa it was for the good school district. Another necessary deception in a marriage built on careful lies. The smell of coffee and bacon greeted him as he opened the front door. Vanessa stood at the kitchen counter, already dressed for her real estate showings in a tailored black dress that probably cost more than his monthly security paycheck. Her dark hair fell in perfect waves, makeup flawless even at this early hour. Everything about her was calculated for maximum effect. "There's my hardworking man." She crossed the kitchen, wrapping her arms around his neck. Her perfume was expensive, subtle enough that only someone standing close would notice. "I made your favorite breakfast." John returned the embrace, his mind automatically cataloging details. Slight tension in her shoulders. Pulse elevated more than usual for morning activity. Breathing pattern suggesting anticipation or anxiety. After years of reading targets before elimination, these observations came as naturally as blinking. "You didn't have to cook," he said, following her to the table where a plate waited. Eggs over easy, bacon extra crispy, toast with butter precisely how he preferred it. Vanessa's attention to detail rivaled his own, though their purposes differed. "Of course I did." She poured coffee into his mug, her movements graceful and precise. The china was expensive, part of her campaign to elevate their lifestyle. We barely see each other these days. I miss you. John sat down, watching as she settled across from him with her own coffee. No food. She rarely ate breakfast, claiming it was better for her figure. But he'd noticed she'd been skipping more meals lately, her attention increasingly focused on her phone. How's the market? Brutal. She stirred her coffee, the spoon making tiny circles that never quite touched the sides of the cup. Everyone wants waterfront views, but nobody wants to pay waterfront prices. Though, she paused, looking up through her lashes with practiced casualness. The Miami market is booming right now. Miami again. John kept his voice neutral, spreading butter on his toast with mechanical precision. The mention of Miami wasn't new, but its frequency had increased over the past month. A pattern worth noting. Just thinking out loud. Vanessa's smile was perfect, practiced in front of mirrors until it hit exactly the right notes of warmth and suggestion. But wouldn't it be nice? Sun, beaches, culture. A real change of pace from all this rain and gloom. We could have a different life there. My job's here. He took a bite of eggs, maintaining eye contact. In interrogations, it was often what people did while speaking that revealed the truth. Vanessa's left hand had started tapping the table, a tell she didn't know she had. It's just security work, John. An edge crept in her voice, crack in the perfect facade. You could do that anywhere. Make more money, too. We could have a boat, entertain clients. She gestured at their surroundings with perfectly manicured fingers. Don't you want more than this? John set down his fork with precise movement. I have everything I need. Vanessa's smile tightened, a micro-expression most people would miss. But John had once identified a Russian operative by the way they blinked. Of course you do. She stood, smoothing her dress with sharp movements. Some of us want more from life than just existing. I have 3 showings this morning. Don't wait up. He watched her leave, listening to the sound of her car starting and pulling away. Once the noise faded, he allowed himself to really look at their home. Photos lined the walls, carefully staged moments capturing the image of a perfect life. Their wedding photo dominated the center. Vanessa radiant in white, John in his dress uniform with medals he couldn't explain. The story of 2 people playing roles they'd chosen for different reasons. Awards from Vanessa's real estate career dominated the mantle, testament to her drive for success. Each one represented a step up the social ladder she seemed desperate to climb. Everything curated, everything controlled, everything pointing toward ambitions that seemed to grow with each passing month. John finished his breakfast methodically, mind processing the morning's details. Vanessa's increased mentions of Miami, the tension in her shoulders, the way she checked her phone 7 times during their brief conversation. Small things, but in his experience, small things were often the difference between life and death. The garage beckoned, his private space free for Vanessa's decorating touch. Tools lined the walls in military precision, each one maintained and stored according to protocols learned in training. Parts were cataloged and stored in labeled containers, methodology applied to mundane tasks. The Triumph motorcycle waited in the center, its chrome already gleaming under the fluorescent lights. He began breaking down the carburetor, each movement precise and purposeful. The work allowed his mind to process while his hands stayed busy. Time slipped away as he cleaned each component, remembering other times when patience and precision had kept him alive. The sound of Vanessa's car returning barely registered until he heard her voice through the window above his workbench. The words froze his hands mid-motion. Don't worry, baby. Once the Russians handle it, it'll look like an accident. Every sense sharpened instantly, body shifting into the state of heightened awareness that had once kept him alive behind enemy lines. Each word reached him with crystal clarity through the slightly open window. The insurance money is ours, and we'll be in Miami before anyone suspects a thing. Vanessa's voice was barely above a whisper, but to John's trained ears, every syllable rang like a bullet casing hitting concrete. A male voice responded through the phone speaker, tinny but distinct enough to analyze. Younger, accent suggesting East Coast origins, tone indicating intimate familiarity. You sure about this? What if it backfires? It won't. Vanessa's laugh was soft, confident in a way she never was with John. John's just a security guard. He'll never see it coming. The wrench made no sound as John set it down. Inside, something fundamental shifted, a door closing on the quiet life he'd tried to build, and another opening to a darker, more familiar path. The ghost wasn't just awake. He was hunting. That he spent the next hour methodically cleaning his tools, mind already mapping contingencies and responses. By the time Vanessa called him up for dinner, he had formulated 12 different scenarios and appropriate countermeasures for each one. The ghost always planned ahead. It's why he'd never failed a mission. The dining room glowed warm under expensive light, fixtures Vanessa had insisted they needed. Crystal glasses caught the light, throwing tiny rainbows across white tablecloths she'd bought from a boutique in Paris. She'd made his favorite meal steak, medium rare, with roasted potatoes. The wine was French, a vintage that cost more than most people spend on groceries in a week. Everything calculated, everything designed to create an impression of perfect domestic harmony. John noted every detail as he sat down, old training kicking in automatically. The table had been set with exact precision, each utensil aligned perfectly. The steak knife was German steel, high quality, but not the best for close combat. 3 candles provided additional lighting, positioned to cast soft shadows that would make reading facial expressions more difficult. Vanessa had planned this dinner carefully. "I thought we could use a nice evening together," she said, pouring wine with practiced grace. The bottle was held at exactly the right angle, a skill learned from the sommelier classes she'd started taking last month. "We barely talk anymore." John cut into his steak. The meat was perfect as always. Vanessa never did anything halfway. Busy times, that's what I mean. She leaned forward, her expression earnest. The candlelight softened her features, a technique she'd probably learned in those real estate seminars she attended. "Maybe we need a change. A fresh start somewhere new. Miami again." He kept his voice neutral, watching her reaction. The slight tensing around her eyes confirmed his suspicions. This wasn't a casual suggestion. "It's just an idea." She reached across the table, touching his hand. Her fingers were cool against his skin, her diamond wedding ring catching the light. "Think about it. We could have such an amazing life there. You could start fresh, maybe even open your own security firm." John let her fingers rest on his for a moment before pulling away to take another bite. In interrogations, physical contact was often used to establish trust before a lie. Amazing is overrated. I prefer reliable. Vanessa's smile faltered for just a second, a crack in her perfect mask. "You can't really mean that. Don't you want more than just this?" She gestured at their surroundings with her wine glass, the movement slightly too sharp. "We're not getting any younger, John. Don't you want to really live before it's too late? What's wrong with this life?" "Nothing, I guess." She stabbed at her salad, the first genuine display of emotion he'd seen all evening. "If you're content with mediocrity, if you're happy just existing." John ate in silence, watching her pretend to eat while pushing food around her plate. Everything about her screamed restlessness, the way she kept checking her phone under the table, how her eyes darted to the windows as darkness fell. The wine in her glass never seemed to decrease despite how often she lifted it to her lips. He thought back to their first meeting 6 years ago. She'd been selling condos in downtown Seattle, and he'd been establishing his cover as a retired military man looking for steady work. Her ambition had been attractive, then a fire that seemed to match the intensity he kept hidden. Now he wondered if they'd both seen in each other what they wanted to see. "I got a call about that waterfront property today," Vanessa said, trying to fill the silence. "The owners might be willing to negotiate. We could do the viewing tomorrow if you're interested. I work nights. You could call in sick. Just this once." She tried another smile, this one reaching for conspiratorial warmth. "When was the last time you took a day off?" 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days. The routine was part of his cover, and he never broke routine without reason. "I'll pass." Vanessa's smile died completely. She stood, gathering plates with sharp movements. "Fine. Live your little life if that's what you want. Some of us have bigger dreams." John helped with the dishes, maintaining the routine. Every movement was measured, every gesture calculated. He'd learned long ago that the best way to observe was to become part of the background. Vanessa barely looked at him as she cleaned, her mind clearly elsewhere. "I think I'll turn in early," she announced finally, making a show of yawning. "You coming up? Got a few things to finish in the garage." She nodded, kissing his cheek. The scent of her perfume was stronger than usual, as if she'd reapplied it recently. "Don't stay up too late." John waited until he heard her bedroom door close before moving. The garage had always been his space, but what Vanessa didn't know was that it was also his armory. Behind a perfectly maintained pegboard of tools, a hidden compartment contained everything the ghost might need. The burner phone came first. It connected to a network that wasn't supposed to exist, accessing numbers that were never written down. His message was simple: "Need information on Russian contract killers. Recently arrived in Seattle." The response came within an hour. Leonid Volkov had arrived 3 days ago. Known for making murders look like accidents. Never failed once hired. The pieces were falling into place like targets in a scope. John pulled up detailed files on Volkov, intelligence gathered by assets he'd maintained even after leaving Phantom Group. The Russian was good, methodical, patient, and thorough. He worked with a small team, including his top enforcer, Igor Sokolov. If Vanessa had hired them, they would have studied his routine already. They would strike somewhere that could be staged as an accident. The laptop came next, pulled from another hidden compartment. Its encrypted drives contained blueprints for every major building in Seattle, knowledge gathered methodically over 3 years of planning for contingencies he'd hoped never to need. Thunder rolled outside as John began planning. The ghost had never failed a mission, and he wasn't about to start now. Especially when he was hunting the people who thought they were hunting him. The Columbia Center's rooftop bar appeared on John's screen. 76 stories up, it offered the perfect combination of privacy and vulnerability. His sources confirmed that Igor Sokolov frequented the place, enjoying the view while conducting business for Leonid. The building's security was good, but John had identified 14 weaknesses during his first month working as a guard. Now he reviewed them all, marking potential angles of attack and escape routes. The maintenance schedule caught his attention. Work crews were scheduled for the express elevator shaft tomorrow night. A few careful keystrokes added an extra work order to the building system, ensuring the shaft would be empty when he needed it. Some of the best kills looked like accidents, and John had learned from the best that he pulled up Igor's file next. The Russian was built like a tank, 6'4", 250 pounds of muscle, known for brute strength and tactical thinking. Military training, probably Spetsnaz, with a record of efficient kills. In any other situation, he'd be a formidable opponent. But John hadn't earned his reputation by fighting fair. The preparations took hours. Each piece of equipment was checked, cleaned, and positioned precisely where he'd need it. When Vanessa's alarm went off upstairs at 6 a.m., John was already cleaning up, erasing every trace of his night's work. She came down dressed for another day of showings, perfect smile in place. "You're up early." Couldn't sleep. John poured coffee into a travel mug. His movements were smooth, practiced, betraying nothing of his night's preparations. "Big sale today. Waterfront property." Vanessa grabbed her keys, not meeting his eyes. "Wish me luck." "Good luck." He watched her leave, knowing it might be the last normal morning they'd ever share. The ghost didn't believe in luck. He made his own outcomes. The day passed in careful preparation. John called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. His supervisor didn't question it. Perfect attendance had earned him the benefit of the doubt. He spent the morning gathering intelligence, calling in favors from people who owed the ghost their lives. By 6 p.m., he had everything he needed. The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke, rain hammering against windows across the city. John dressed with practiced efficiency. Dark clothes that wouldn't draw attention, boots with specially modified soles for silent movement, a jacket that concealed both weapons and tools. The Columbia Center's lobby was crowded with people escaping the rain. John moved through them like smoke, just another face in the crowd. His security background had taught him every camera's blind spot, every staff member's routine. Nobody noticed him entering the service elevator. Maintenance access let him emerge on the 75th floor unseen. He moved through the mechanical spaces, setting up his equipment with surgical precision. The elevator shaft stretched above and below like an urban canyon, maintenance lights casting strange shadows on the steel walls. The VY-730. He was in position. The tiny camera he'd placed in the bar fed video to his phone, giving him a perfect view of the entrance. Igor arrived exactly on schedule, flanked by two men whose movements marked them as experienced muscle. Their eyes scanned constantly, hands never far from concealed weapons. Professional paranoia at its finest. John watched through the feed as Igor met with his contacts. The Russian's bulk made him easy to track as he moved through the crowd. 2 hours passed. Igor drank steadily, but showed no signs of impairment. His guards remained alert, watching angles and exits with trained precision. At T-1045, Igor headed for the restroom. John moved. The maintenance corridor connected to the restroom's utility closet. As Igor's footsteps approached, John activated the device he'd planted earlier. Smoke began seeping under the door. The alarm wasn't loud, just enough to trigger an evacuation protocol. Right on cue, security began directing people toward the stairs. Igor's guards would be waiting at the bottom. But Igor himself, closest to the elevator, would take the express car down. Standard VIP evacuation procedure. John heard the elevator doors open, then Igor's heavy steps entering the car. The Russian was too well-trained to panic, but he'd take the fastest route down. The doors closed. The car began to descend. 3 floors down, it stopped. Emergency protocols John had programmed hours ago. The lights flickered and died, leaving only dim emergency strips illuminating the shaft through the maintenance hatch. Igor's patience lasted exactly 47 seconds before he tried the hatch. As it opened, John was already moving. The Russian barely had time to register movement before John struck. The fight was brutal and quick. Igor had strength and reach, but the confined space nullified his advantages. John moved like water in the darkness, each strike targeting vital points with ruthless efficiency. When Igor tried to draw a weapon, John turned the movement against him, using the Russian's own momentum to slam him into the shaft wall. "Who are you?" Igor gasped, blood streaming from his nose. John didn't answer. The ghost never did. The Russian lunged, desperation making him sloppy. John sidestepped, grabbed Igor's jacket, and used his own weight to pull them both toward the edge. At the last second, John pivoted. Igor's eyes widened as he realized what was happening, but by then it was too late. The shaft swallowed his scream. John watched until the emergency lights stopped illuminating movement, then retrieved his equipment with mechanical precision. 10 minutes later, he walked out of the Columbia Center's lobby, just another person hurrying through the rain. The message would be clear to anyone who knew how to read it. The ghost was hunting. And this time, the predators had become prey. Back in his garage, John cleaned his equipment and restored everything to its proper place. The laptop showed him security footage of Vanessa arriving home an hour ago. She'd taken 2 sleeping pills with her evening wine, a habit she thought he didn't know about. He climbed the stairs silently, passing their bedroom where Vanessa slept, unaware that her world had already begun to unravel. In the guest room, John lay down fully dressed, mind already planning the next move in this deadly game. Tomorrow, Leonid Volkov would learn that his top enforcer had disappeared. Soon after, he'd realized that taking this particular contract had been the biggest mistake of his life. But for now, John closed his eyes, letting the sound of rain against the windows wash away the night's violence. The ghost was awake, and he never forgave betrayal. Pike Place Market buzzed with morning activity as John moved through the crowd. Rain had given way to weak sunshine, turning the cobblestones slick. He'd tracked one of Leonid's men here, a wiry Ukrainian named Dmitri, who thought he was following John's morning routine. The smell of fresh fish and coffee filled the air as John stopped at a vegetable stand, pretending to examine tomatoes while watching Dmitri's reflection in the metal pricing sign. The Ukrainian kept his distance, trying to be subtle. Amateur work. "Fresh batch just came in," the vendor said, gesturing to the tomatoes. "Best in Seattle." John picked up 2, testing their weight. "I'll take 4. The simple interaction was part of his cover, a normal man running normal errands. Behind him, Dmitri shifted position, speaking quietly into what looked like a Bluetooth earpiece. Moving deeper into the market, John led his tail past rows of flower stands and craft booths. He'd chosen this location carefully. Too many cameras made proper surveillance difficult, and the crowds provided cover for what would happen next. A burly fishmonger recognized John with a nod. "Usual order?" "Not today, Mike." John leaned on the counter, positioning himself so Dmitri would need to move closer to maintain visual contact. "Need something special. Wife's planning a dinner party." Mike played his part perfectly, launching into a detailed description of his inventory. John watched Dmitri edge nearer in the reflective surface of the ice display. "You know what?" John straightened up. "Let me check with her first." He turned abruptly, bumping directly into Dmitri. The collision seemed accidental to anyone watching, but John's elbow found the exact nerve cluster that would make the Ukrainian's right arm go numb. "Sorry about that." John steadied Dmitri with a grip that looked helpful, but hit 3 more pressure points. "Wasn't watching where I was going." Dmitri tried to respond, but his mouth wouldn't form words properly. John leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper only the Ukrainian could hear. "Tell Leonid he's hunting the wrong man. Walk away now. You might live through the week." He released his grip, and Dmitri stumbled back, fear replacing the professional mask he'd worn all morning. The Ukrainian turned and pushed through the crowd, trying to run without looking like he was running. John watched him go, then turned back to Mike. "Rain check on that order." "Anytime, brother." Mike had seen nothing unusual, just a clumsy collision between customers. "Perfect." John spent the next hour letting Leonid's other men think they were tracking him. Each one received a similar message, delivered in ways that would never attract attention. By noon, 3 of Leonid's surveillance team had gone dark, leaving the city without looking back. His phone buzzed a message from one of his old contacts. Leonid had received the package containing Igor's signature ring, wrapped in the blood-stained cloth. The predator was learning what it meant to be prey. Back home, John found Vanessa in the kitchen, arguing with someone on her phone. She turned quickly when he entered, surprise flickering across her face. "I'll call you back," she said into the phone, ending the call. "You're home early." "Took a half day." John set his shopping bag on the counter. "Everything okay?" "Fine." Vanessa's smile was tight. "Just a difficult client. You know how it is." She gestured to his bag. "What's all this?" "Thought I'd cook tonight." Her eyebrows rose. "You never cook. Time to try new things." He began unpacking groceries, watching her reaction in the reflection of the kitchen window. The mention of change made her nervous. "Good. I actually have a showing tonight." Vanessa moved toward the door. "Rain check." "Sure." John kept his voice casual. "That waterfront property? Different one." She grabbed her keys. "Don't wait up." John waited until her car pulled away before retrieving his laptop. Time to see exactly where she was going. The GPS tracker he'd placed on her car months ago was finally proving useful. The signal showed her heading downtown, but not toward any residential areas. Instead, she parked near a hotel, the kind that charged by the hour and didn't ask questions. John pulled up the hotel's security feed, courtesy of back doors he'd installed throughout the city. Vanessa met a man in the lobby, younger, flashy clothes, too much jewelry. Jeremy Blake, the Miami connection. They spoke briefly before heading to the elevator. John turned off the feed. He didn't need to see more. The garage beckoned, but he had work to do first. Another of Leonid's men would be watching the house. Time to send another message. John changed into running clothes, part of his normal routine. As he stretched in the driveway, he spotted the surveillance car parked 2 blocks away. The viewer would be reporting his movements, expecting a predictable 5-mile route. Instead, John took a path through the local park. Dense trees and winding trails made it perfect for what would happen next. He paced himself, maintaining the appearance of a normal jog until he reached the most isolated section. The man following him was good, maintaining distance, using cover, staying quiet. But good wasn't enough against the ghost. John stopped suddenly, readying his shoe. The tail had 2 choices: stop awkwardly or pass him. He chose to pass, trying to look like another runner. Nice day for a run. John said as the man drew even with him. The Russian tried to respond naturally, but his accent gave him away. What happened next took less than 10 seconds. John's hand shot out, fingertips finding nerve clusters that dropped the Russian to his knees. A precise strike to the throat prevented any sound. The man tried to draw a weapon, but his arms wouldn't respond to commands. "Pay attention," John said softly, crouching beside him. "This is your one warning. Take a message to Leonid. The ghost says hello." He left the Russian gasping on the trail, knowing another name would be crossed off Leonid's list of available men by sunset. The fear was spreading. Good. Vanessa returned home after midnight, her movements careful and controlled as she entered the house. John sat in the darkness of the living room, watching her try to sneak upstairs. "Late showing." His voice made her jump. "John, I thought you'd be asleep." She switched on a lamp, forcing a smile. "The clients were very particular. You know how it is. Must be quite a property." He stood, noting how she took a small step back. "To keep you out until midnight. Multiple properties, actually." Her hand tightened on her purse strap. "I was going to tell you over breakfast. I might need to go to Miami next week. Just for a few days. There's a client interested in buying several units." "Sounds promising." John moved toward the kitchen. "Want some coffee? At this hour? Why not? You're already up." He started the coffee maker, its gurgle filling the silence. "Tell me about these Miami properties." Vanessa hesitated, then sat at the kitchen counter. "They're luxury condos. Ocean view, private beach access. The kind of properties that practically sell themselves. Like that development on Collins Avenue." John kept his voice casual as he pulled 2 mugs from the cabinet. "The one Jeremy Blake is investing in?" The color drained from Vanessa's face. I don't know any Jeremy Blake." "No." John set a mug in front of her. "Interesting guy. Owns some nightclubs. Has interesting friends in the Russian community." Vanessa's hands shook as she reached for the coffee. "How do you know about him?" John leaned against the counter. "I know lots of things, Vanessa. Like how your car was parked at the Marina Hotel for 3 hours today. Not many properties to show there. You're having me followed." Anger crept into her voice, replacing fear. "Just keeping track of my investments." He sipped his coffee. "Speaking of which, did you move my car earlier?" "What? No, why would I?" "Because it wasn't quite where I parked it this morning. Moved about 6 inches to the left." He watched her process this information. "And someone touched my motorcycle. Left fingerprints on the chrome." Vanessa stood abruptly. "You're imagining things. I'm going to bed. Sleep well." John watched her hurry upstairs, counting the seconds until her door closed. Phase 1 of psychological warfare. Plant the seeds of doubt. The next morning, Vanessa found her car keys in the wrong place on the key hook. Nothing obvious, just enough to make her question her memory. In her office, papers were slightly rearranged. Her phone started having strange glitches, messages arriving hours late. John watched her unravel over the next few days. She jumped at small noises, checked the locks repeatedly, kept looking over her shoulder. The confident mask cracked a little more each time she noticed something out of place at a coffee shop downtown. She met with Jeremy again. This time, John made sure they spotted him across the street. He smiled and waved, then disappeared into the crowd before they could react. 20 minutes later, Jeremy's car wouldn't start, a simple electrical problem that any mechanic would dismiss as random failure. That evening, Vanessa paced the kitchen, arguing in whispers on her phone. "It's not cold feet," she hissed. "Something's wrong. He knows things." "No, I'm not being paranoid. Just call Leonid and tell him to hurry up." John let a floorboard creak, and Vanessa whirled around. The kitchen was empty, but her phone slipped from trembling fingers. The next phase began at the Seattle Aquarium. One of Leonid's men had gotten sloppy, letting John spot their surveillance schedule. Time to turn their hunting ground into a killing field. The night event was some corporate fundraiser, the kind of thing Vanessa usually loved. But she'd begged off with a headache, leaving John to attend alone. Perfect. Blue light from massive tanks cast rippling shadows through the aquarium's walkways. Families and couples wandered between exhibits, oohing at exotic fish and touching starfish in shallow pools. John moved among them, just another guest enjoying the displays Leonid's remaining men were spread throughout the building. 4 of them, trying to be subtle about watching him. They'd waited for a public place, thinking witnesses would protect them. They didn't understand that witnesses could be used as cover. The first one went down in the jellyfish exhibit. The dark room and hypnotic displays kept everyone's attention on the ghostly creatures floating in blue tanks. Nobody noticed the precise strike that sent the Russian stumbling into a maintenance corridor, where unconsciousness took him quietly. "Beautiful creatures, aren't they?" John said to a young couple watching the jellies. "So delicate but deadly." He drifted toward the tunnel tank next, where sharks swam overhead. The second Russian followed, hand concealed in his jacket. Amateur move too obvious that a group of schoolchildren ran past, creating momentary chaos. When they cleared, the Russian was gone, now floating face down in a service pool behind the tank. The water would keep him alive until security found him, but his hunting days were over. The third man was smarter, keeping his distance and staying in crowds. But he made the mistake of using his radio, confirming the presence of a fourth man near the orca tank. John let him live. Someone needed to report back to Leonid. The fourth man waited near the giant Pacific octopus exhibit, thinking the curved tank gave him a tactical advantage. He was right, but it didn't matter. John simply triggered the fire alarm in that section, using the evacuation protocol to separate him from the crowd. They met in the maintenance area behind the tank. The Russian drew a knife, desperation making him reckless. "You can't kill us all," he snarled in heavily accented English. "I don't need to." John stepped into the blue light, filtering through the tank. Just enough to send a message. The fight was brief, but brutal. The Russian had skill, but he'd expected a security guard, not the ghost. When it ended, John pulled him close and whispered in his ear, "Tell Leonid he should have stayed in Moscow." He left the Russian alive, but broken, zip-tied to a pipe where security would find him. By the time police arrived, John was already gone, leaving 4 more names crossed off Leonid's rapidly shrinking list of available men. Detective Olivia Monroe studied the incident reports spread across her desk, each one detailing another accident at the aquarium. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago as she connected the dots. "For men, all Russian nationals," she muttered, circling details, "all with interesting backgrounds." A knock on her office door interrupted her thoughts. "Detective Monroe? Someone here to see you." John stood in the doorway, wearing his security guard uniform. "Got a minute?" "Mr. Mercer." Olivia gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Funny, I was just about to call you." "About the aquarium?" John sat down, his posture relaxed but alert. "Heard there was some trouble there last night." "Trouble is putting it mildly." Olivia pushed a photo across her desk surveillance footage of John at the jellyfish exhibit. "You were there, along with hundreds of others." His voice remained neutral. "Nice event. The kids love the sharks. 4 men were hospitalized." She watched his face for any reaction, all with very specific injuries. "Professional hits. Sounds dangerous. Maybe they had enemies." "Maybe." Olivia leaned forward. "Here's what's interesting. All 4 were seen watching someone, and that someone looks remarkably like you." John met her gaze steadily. "Detective, I'm a security guard. I spent 15 years in the military before that. The most exciting thing I do now is escort drunk executives to taxis." "That's what your file says." She tapped another folder. "But there are gaps. Interesting gaps. Military records aren't always complete." "These aren't gaps in records, Mr. Mercer. These are gaps in existence. Periods where you simply vanish." John's expression didn't change. "Must be a filing error." "Must be." Olivia stood, walking to her window. "You know what else is interesting? The timing. Your wife recently took out a substantial life insurance policy on you." "Did she?" Now, there was a hint of something in his voice, not surprise, but confirmation. $2 million. Olivia turned back to face him. "That's a lot of money for a security guard. Vanessa handles our finances. She also handles Jeremy Blake's real estate investments." Olivia watched for a reaction. "Know anything about that?" "Should I?" "He's an interesting character. Nightclub owner in Miami. Connections to certain Russian organizations." She paused. The same Russians who keep having accidents around you. John stood slowly. Sounds like you have an interesting case, detective. But I should get to work. Those drunk executives won't escort themselves. One more thing. Olivia held up a plastic evidence bag containing a ring. Found this at the Columbia Center, where another Russian had an unfortunate accident. Mean anything to you? Should it? It belonged to Igor Sokolov. Very bad man who recently disappeared. She set the bag down. The security footage from that night is mysteriously corrupted. Technology can be unreliable. So can Wazoo take out large insurance policies? Olivia's voice hardened. Whatever's going on, Mr. Mercer, keep it clean. I'd hate to find more bodies. No bodies so far, detective. John moved to the door. Just accidents. Right. She watched him leave, then picked up her phone. Time to put surveillance on Vanessa Mercer. Across town, Leonid Volkov slammed his fist on his desk, scattering reports of his injured men. How? He demanded in Russian. What does a security guard do this? The surviving man from the aquarium, arm in a sling, shook his head. He's not just a guard. The way he moves, the tactics he uses, he's something else. He's a ghost. Another man whispered. The ghost. Leonid's head snapped up. What did you say? There were stories years ago. An American operative. Never left traces. Never failed. They called him the ghost. Fairy tales. But Leonid's voice lacked conviction. He'd heard the stories too. No one ever saw his face. The injured man continued. No one knew his real name. He'd appear, eliminate targets, and vanish. Just like now. Leonid stood, pacing his office. The contract had seemed simple. Stage an accident, collect payment, move on. Now, his best men were hospitalized or running scared. His phone buzzed. Vanessa Mercer's number. Where are your men? She demanded without greeting. He knows something. He's playing with us. Calm down. Leonid kept his voice steady. Everything is under control. Control? My car moves when I'm not there. Things in my house change position. My phone has strange glitches. He's watching us. We're handling it. Handle it faster. Jeremy's getting nervous. If he pulls out, tell your boyfriend to be patient. Leonid's voice turned cold. This is more complicated than we thought. I don't care about complicated. I care about results. Vanessa's voice cracked. Just finish it. Leonid ended the call, staring at the reports again. The ghost. If the stories were true, get everyone back, he ordered. All teams. We do this differently now. Sir. The injured man looked uncertain. What about the contract? The contract stays. But now we know what we're hunting. Leonid pulled up an encrypted file on his laptop. And ghosts can be killed. We just need the right bait. In his home garage, John cleaned his equipment with methodical precision. Each tool returned to its exact place. Each surface wiped clean. The laptop showed camera feed from around the house, including Vanessa's office, where she paced while making frantic calls. The psychological pressure was working. She jumped at shadows now, checked every room before entering, kept looking over her shoulder. The confident mask was cracking. His phone buzzed with an alert from one of his surveillance programs. Leonid had called in more men professionals this time, from Moscow. The game was escalating. John allowed himself a small smile as he checked his weapons. Let them come. The ghost was ready. The next phase would begin soon. Vanessa and Jeremy thought they were clever, plotting his death for insurance money. Leonid thought he was untouchable in his fortified office. They all thought they were predators. Time to show them what it meant to be hunted by a real ghost. Miami's heat hit like a wall as John exited the airport. The humidity wrapped around him, so different from Seattle's cool mist. Perfect weather for hunting. Detective Monroe's surveillance team had tracked Vanessa onto a flight to Miami 3 days ago. She left a note about an emergency business trip. John knew better. She was running. His phone buzzed with an update from his contacts. Jeremy Blake's yacht, the Paradise Dream, was hosting a party tonight. The guest list included Miami's elite, Russian mobsters, and one particular real estate agent who thought she'd escaped. The hotel room John checked into offered a clear view of the marina. He unpacked methodically, each weapon and tool finding its designated place. The ghost's equipment had passed through customs and diplomatic pouches. Old contacts still proved useful, but a knock at the door interrupted his preparation. John opened it to find Detective Monroe, looking uncomfortable in the Miami heat. "Quite a coincidence," she said, stepping inside without invitation. "You taking vacation days right after your wife flies down here?" "I miss her." John closed the door. "Marriage counseling, you know how it is." "Right." Monroe wiped sweat from her forehead. "Nothing to do with Jeremy Blake's yacht party tonight, should it?" "Cut the act, Mercer." She dropped into a chair. "I know what's happening. Your wife and Blake hired Leonid Volkov to kill you. But instead of dying, you've been systematically destroying Volkov's organization." John remained silent, watching her. "Here's what I can't figure out," Monroe continued. "How does a security guard do that? Unless—" She pulled out a file. "Unless he's not really a security guard. Unless he's something else. Something that doesn't officially exist. Interesting theory. I checked with old contacts in intelligence. There were stories years ago about an operative they called the Ghost." She met his eyes. "Ring any bells?" "Ghost stories." John moved to the window, checking the marina. "Better suited for Halloween. People are going to die tonight, aren't they? Only if they make poor choices." John turned back to her. "Why are you here, Detective?" Monroe stood. "Officially, to prevent multiple homicides. Unofficially," she placed a thumb drive on the table. "Security codes for the marina. Camera blueprints. Guard rotations. Why? Because sometimes justice wears a badge." She moved to the door. "And sometimes it wears a ghost mask. Just keep it clean." After she left, John reviewed the thumb drive's contents. The detective was thorough, every detail he'd need for tonight's operation. Time to prepare. Evening brought cooler air and gathering storm clouds. John watched through binoculars as guests arrived at the yacht. Men in expensive suits, women in designer dresses. Jeremy Blake greeting them at the gangway, playing the perfect host. Vanessa arrived at 9, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than their monthly mortgage. She clung to Jeremy's arm, laughing at his jokes, pretending she wasn't constantly scanning the crowd, that John's phone vibrated. A message from his surveillance program. Leonid had landed in Miami. The Russian was making his final play. The yacht's lights reflected on dark water as music drifted across the marina. John moved through shadows, avoiding security patrols with practiced ease. The Ghost had never failed a mission. Tonight would be no different. He reached the yacht's stern undetected. The party was in full swing on the main deck, giving him space to work. One by one, security guards began disappearing into the night. No bodies, no sound, just empty posts and missing radios that at precisely 10:30, John triggered the power cut. The yacht plunged into darkness as backup generators failed to engage. Music died. Lights went out. The only illumination came from the storm clouds reflecting off the water. Panic spread through the crowd. Jeremy's voice rose above the confusion. "Everyone stay calm. It's just a technical issue." But Vanessa knew better. John watched through night vision as she grabbed Jeremy's arm. "He's here." Impossible. Jeremy tried to sound confident. No one could get past security. A guard's radio crackled to life, broadcasting on all frequencies. All posts report status. Silence answered. "See anything suspicious?" More silence. Vanessa's grip on Jeremy's arm tightened. "We need to leave. Now. Don't be ridiculous." Jeremy pulled away. "It's just an electrical problem. I'll check the breakers myself." John smiled in the darkness. Time to begin. Jeremy Blake moved through his darkened yacht with forced confidence, flashlight beam cutting through shadows. Thunder rumbled overhead as the storm approached, adding nature's tension to the night. "Just a breaker issue," he announced to the nervous crowd. "Everyone stay in the main salon. Have another drink. Everything's under control." Vanessa watched him disappear below deck, her hands shaking as she clutched her champagne glass. The other guests huddled in confused groups, whispering theories about the power failure. None of them knew they were trapped in a hunter's killing ground. Lightning flashed, illuminating the deck for a split second. In that instant, Vanessa saw a figure standing at the stern, a silhouette she'd recognize anywhere. When darkness returned, it was gone. She grabbed her phone, dialing with trembling fingers. "Leonid? Where are your men?" "They're in position." The Russian's voice was tense. No one's getting on that boat. He's already here. Vanessa's voice cracked. John's on board. Silence stretched for several seconds. Impossible. My men, your men are gone. John's voice cut through their connection. Just like Igor. The line went dead. Vanessa stared at her phone in horror as another flash of lightning revealed empty security posts around the yacht's perimeter. Below deck, Jeremy reached the main breaker panel. His confident mask slipped as he found it untouched. Whatever killed the power wasn't an accident. Looking for this, John stepped from the shadows, holding a circuit board. Amazing how many systems fail when you remove the right piece. Jeremy spun around, drawing a pistol from his jacket. How did you get past security? Same way I got past Igor. John's voice was calm. The same way I'll get past Leonid. One piece at a time. Stay back. Jeremy's hand trembled slightly. I've got 6 rounds that say you're not as ghost-like as people think. 6 rounds. John took a step forward. In a gun you've never fired outside of range. Against someone who's killed more men than you've met. Lightning illuminated the narrow space, reflecting off polished walls. Jeremy fired twice, the shots deafening in the confined area. When his vision cleared, John was gone. Missed. The voice came from behind him. Before Jeremy could turn, something struck his wrist. The gun clattered to the floor. Now, John said, let's talk about your plan to kill Vanessa. What? Jeremy backed away, cradling his injured hand. I would never. The insurance policy was your idea. John advanced slowly. Get her to take one out on me. Hire Leonid, split the money. But you were never going to share. She's lying to you. Whatever she said, you haven't even taken out the policy on her yet. John's voice hardened. Waiting until after I'm dead, right? Then another tragic accident. And you keep everything. Fear replaced the bravado in Jeremy's eyes. How did you? I know everything. John moved faster than Jeremy could track. A precise strike dropped the younger man to his knees. Every plan, every backup plan, every lie you told her. Wait. Jeremy gasped. We can make a deal. Split everything 3 ways. More money than you'd make in 10 years of security work. John grabbed Jeremy's collar, dragging him toward the stairs. Time to tell Vanessa the truth. Above deck, the storm broke. Rain pounded the yacht as John pushed Jeremy onto the main deck. Lightning revealed Vanessa standing by the railing, her red dress dark with rain. Tell her, John commanded. Vanessa, baby, don't listen to him. Jeremy tried to stand, but another strike kept him down. He's crazy. Tell her about the second insurance policy. John's voice cut through the storm. The one you're going to take out on her. What? Vanessa stepped forward. Jeremy, he's lying. But Jeremy's eyes betrayed him. I love you. Love. John laughed coldly. Tell her about Miami Beach Point. The property deal you're using to launder cartel money. The same deal you promised would make her rich. Thunder crashed as Vanessa's world crumbled. Jeremy? Is that true? The money's clean. Jeremy's desperation showed. Mostly clean. But we can be rich, baby. So rich. Just help me finish this. Finish what? Vanessa's voice was barely audible over the storm. Your murder. John answered. After I'm dead and the insurance pays, Jeremy here is going to arrange another accident. Take everything for himself. No, but Vanessa saw the truth in Jeremy's face. You were going to kill me. Nobody was supposed to get hurt. Jeremy tried to crawl toward her. Just quick and clean. Nobody would know. John stepped back, letting them face each other. The ghost's work was done. Now they would destroy themselves. I trusted you. Vanessa's voice broke. I betrayed my husband for you, and I betrayed the cartel for you. Jeremy shouted back. Do you know what they'll do to me now? I needed that insurance money. Lightning flashed again, revealing the full tableau. Vanessa by the railing, Jeremy broken on the deck, and John watching it all unravel. The storm raged around them, nature's fury matching the human drama playing out on the yacht's rain-slicked deck. The storm raged across Miami Bay as Vanessa backed away from Jeremy, rain plastering her dress against her skin. Lightning revealed the horror and betrayal on her face as everything she'd built crumbled around her. All this time, she whispered, barely audible over the thunder. Every promise, every plan, it was all a lie. Not all of it. Jeremy tried to stand, stumbling on the wet deck. We could still make this work. Just help me deal with him, and we'll figure something out. Deal with him? Vanessa laughed, the sound edged with hysteria. You don't even know who he is, do you? Who you try to kill? He's just a security guard. Jeremy shouted against the wind. Tell him, John. Vanessa turned to her husband. Tell him who the ghost really is. John stepped forward, his movements fluid despite the rolling deck. You should have done better research, Jeremy. Before taking contract on someone, always know their real background. What's he talking about? Jeremy looked between them, realization slowly dawning. Wait, you're the man Igor Sokolov couldn't kill. John's voice was calm, almost conversational. The one who turned Leonid's men against him. The operative they call the ghost. Jeremy's face went pale. Those were just stories. Urban legends about some American assassin, no legend. Vanessa's bitter laugh cut him off. I married him. Lived with him for 6 years. Never knew what he really was until now. Lightning flashed again, thunder following instantly. The storm was directly overhead now, nature's fury matching the human drama playing out on deck. We can still fix this. Jeremy reached for Vanessa. Think about it. With his skills, our connections, we could own this city. Own the city. John shook his head. You still don't understand. Show him your phone, Vanessa. The text you just got from your bank. Vanessa pulled out her phone with shaking hands. My accounts, they're empty. Everything's gone. Transferred to offshore accounts, John explained. Along with evidence of your real estate fraud, Jeremy's cartel connections, and Leonid's contract-killing business. Detective Monroe has copies of everything. You can't do this. Jeremy lunged forward, pulling a hidden blade from his sleeve. I won't lose everything. The fight was brutally short. Jeremy had street skills and desperate fury, but he was facing a ghost. 3 moves, and the blade clattered across the deck. 2 more, and Jeremy hung suspended over the railing. John's grip the only thing keeping him from the dark water below. Please. Jeremy's bravado crumbled. I'll disappear. You'll never see me again. That's right. John released his grip. You won't. Jeremy's splash was lost in the storm's noise. He surfaced, sputtering and flailing. Help. I can't swim well. Better learn fast. John turned away as Jeremy struggled in the waves. The current's strong tonight. Vanessa stood frozen, watching her dreams literally go under. Are you going to kill me too? No. John stepped closer. Death will be too easy. You're going to live with what you've done. Police sirens pierced the storm's fury. Red and blue lights reflected off the rain as boats approached the yacht. Detective Monroe's voice came over a megaphone. This is the police. Everyone stay where you are. Right on time. John turned to Vanessa. They have your full confession. Every detail of your plot with Jeremy. Every conversation with Leonid. Every fraudulent deal you made. How? I bugged your phone the day you made that first call to Jeremy. John's voice held no emotion. Recorded everything. The police will be very interested in your international real estate scams. Vanessa's legs gave out, and she sank to the deck. John, please, we can start over. I'll do anything. That's your problem, Vanessa. You'll do anything for money. For status. For a fantasy life in Miami. He looked down at her, remembering the woman he'd once loved. But you forgot the one thing that mattered. What's that? Never betray a ghost. Detective Monroe boarded first, officers spreading out behind her. She took in the scene. Vanessa broken on the deck, Jeremy nowhere in sight, John standing calmly in the rain. Mrs. Mercer, Monroe held up a warrant. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and about a dozen other charges we'll discuss at the station. As officers led Vanessa away, Monroe turned to John. Jeremy Blake? He decided to go for a swim. Monroe looked over the railing at the choppy water. In this weather? Not very smart. Bad decisions seem to be his specialty. We'll drag the bay tomorrow. Monroe watched Vanessa being escorted off the yacht. Found enough evidence in her files to put her away for 20 years. Plus, she'll have to testify against Leonid's organization. Leonid won't be an issue. John's phone buzzed. He checked it, nodded once. He'd tried to run. His plane had an unfortunate mechanical failure over the Atlantic. Monroe chose not to ask for details. What will you do now? Disappear? John looked out over the dark water. The ghost needs rest. 3 months later, a small cabin stood peaceful beside a lake in the Pacific Northwest. John sat on the porch, watching sunset paint the water gold. No more shadows to chase. No more betrayals to avenge. His phone contained one new message: Detective Monroe updating him on the case. Vanessa's confession had helped dismantle Leonid's entire operation. She would serve 15 years for her crimes. Jeremy's body had washed up on a beach in Cuba, another tragic accident in a storm. John deleted the message. That life was over. Here, in the quiet solitude of the mountains, he could finally let the ghost rest. Some betrayals deserved silence. Some deserved destruction. He had delivered both. The sun dipped below the mountains, leaving the lake dark and still. Tomorrow would bring another peaceful day. But if the world ever needed the ghost again, well, some skills never died.